most organizations out there have data ops products enabled. They have visual data products. So how do we pull all that together and really unleash it?
A lot of the problem has to do with not really understanding what a digital twin is, and they just want to put everything in a big model.
Really sitting down with an owner or client and understanding, right, are you running simulations? Is this for O&M data? Like, what exactly are you trying to get from this?
The misunderstanding and the overpromising usually starts internally with that organization.
I think the real payoff for us as an engineering company was the ability to iterate design without sending more people out to survey again and again and again and again.
We've come out and said reality first, trying to drive that as much as possible because it lowers the cost.
So reduction of cost on the back and forth of site and better quality outcomes from the iterative design. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Got a great panel here for you this morning. A really relevant question around, whether digital twins are all hype or whether or not there's true success being seen here. So we're going to just ask some questions. Everyone's going to kind of tackle these as we go, and we can get started. So first question is, when you strip away all the hype, what's the simplest way that you can explain the real value of digital twins? So I'm not sure who wants to take that one. I'll start.
Predictability. I will just resume it on that word. You will be able to predict what your infrastructure building or digital twin can do.
That's a good one. So predictability where? You're dealing with a lot of the construction, planning, coordination.
Critical assets that will make you run smoothly, I guess.
Right. So actually making decisions, active decisions of using the twin to actually work digitally.
Correct.
Right? Anyone else want to tackle that? Kyle.
Access to the right data at the right time. I don't know. It's like a kind of macro thing that covers a lot of areas, but I mean, that's where we're seeing the biggest benefit for us.
Yeah. And at Exxon, a lot of management has changed. So there's a lot of dispersed data today, right? So
yes,
that's a big one for you, isn't it?
For sure. Definitely is.
Yeah, I of course agree with that. And I would also say as soon as you can have a deeper level of understanding about the way that your assets are operating and the way your teams are working on them, you've already won. So by layering different data sets in reality or geospatial data is, there's an intrinsic value just from delivering that to your team.
Oh, yeah. And visual and spatial data are data sets that have the same level of weight that engineering, inspection, maintenance data do. I think that's probably like a big switch of mindset.
Yeah. No one answered the hype question, though, yet. So.
Oh.
Are we dodging that one, or are we on board? Go ahead.
Yeah, to pick up on this, I think you mentioned equal weights. Well, to me, a digital twin is accumulated learning, right? It's something that's synthesized, comes from a variety of inputs, and it's built into a single digital symbol or avatar or model. But it's an aggregation of a lot of different data sources and so in that way it's for me accumulated learning.
Right.
I think it's all about decision making, getting the information in the right people's hands as quickly as possible, and even when you're battling through some of the bells and whistles that aren't necessary or just slowing you down, I think getting that information to the right people as quickly as possible is important.
Right. So it sounds like everyone is beyond the hype or into the value, but it's all about how we're using the data to do our job, right? Is that right? Okay, great. Next question. Let's go on to where have you seen digital twins overpromised, and where have they been misunderstood in practice?
Yeah, I can start with that one. And actually, Casey and I were laughing before we came on stage because I made some pretty brazen statements about digital twin hype after a couple too many old fashions. But I think that when we're talking about hype or overpromising, we've really been seeing a trend over the last few months or a year where organizations are putting out RFIs and RFPs for digital twins. And it's almost as if they're approaching them like monolithic or singular products and not really understanding the complexity and the different components that you must have to get to that level of maturity where you have, design data, reality data, operating data, projects, but they're just bundling it up and saying, okay, give me this.
Yeah.
And so there's a real overpromise or over expectation of how to build it and how quickly you can get it. So I would say that's something that we've seen.
I've seen quite a few of those RFPs where it's just like, how do you even respond to this?
Yeah.
Where are you starting? What is the
Use
problem
heaven.
you want to solve? Yeah.
You want
Everything.
you want it to solve every use case that's out there.
Every problem we ever had, it's the oracle of the digital twin's going to solve it.
Yeah, it's not even starting at, okay, let's see what, visual geospatial data we have. It's show me what AI models you can give me when I get there. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yes. Yeah. Good.
Maybe just like to tag onto that, I think this might be a hot topic, but the aspect of visual simulation, I think it's a really powerful thing to potentially be able to do within our industry, but it's actually not, I wouldn't say it's hyped up, but it's not kind of like the core piece that we should be driving for right off the bat.
Yeah, I think simulation is a good topic, actually,
Yeah.
that one, because even what does simulation mean? Do I mean to be able to visually see something happen? Am I running physics-based simulation? I feel simulation is
Simulation is powerful.
misunderstood, but it's powerful. But it's also kind of design and planning kind of outcome. But yeah, I think that's a big one that people like to say it, and that's what they want. But what business problem are you solving?
Exactly.
What do you really want from that? And that, actually responding to one right now. And it's like they say simulation, and it's like, well, that's a capability, but what are we simulating?
What do you simulate?
I mean, many different things, a lot of data inputs that they need to
movement?
do that. Yeah. Yeah. Great.
To go back to getting those RFPs asking for digital twins, we see that a lot on the general contractor side. So we'll have clients who just put out, we want an LOD 500 model, or we want a digital twin, without the basis as to what that definition actually means and the standards that you are expecting. That's a very convoluted request. So just the importance of defining that in like the pursuit phase as you're pursuing a project, or like as soon as you win it, really sitting down with an owner or client and understanding, right, are you running simulations? Is this for O&M data? Like, what exactly are you trying to get from this? So we can plan accordingly.
So we just recently responded to an RFP in which they were asking for weather data within the Bing model to run simulations, besides the LOD 500 too. So I believe a lot of the problem has to do with not really understanding what really a digital twin is, and they just want to put everything in just a big model maybe. So
Yeah. I see that a lot.
I'd like to add that the misunderstanding and the overpromising usually starts internally with that organization, and it's managing internal expectations and standards. So in the industrial petrochemical, it all starts with how those catalogs and specifications are developed and what metadata is included with that. And so if your Aviva, Plan 3D, CADWorks, whatever it is not set up correctly from the get-go, then there's a race backwards. You're getting on a treadmill going the wrong way.
Yeah. Agreed.
Can't agree more on that for sure. I mean, I think that's like one of our biggest Achilles heels is our industry's catalogs and specs.
Yeah.
And being able to standardize on that.
And some of that starts with the Autodesks. They need to get on board with this stuff. So you have those service providers that own the market, and they're not keeping up.
Yeah.
And now that you mentioned that, yes, that topic about the software vendors, they might overpromise on what their technology can do, and the owners might understand that with a couple of clicks they can just get a digital twin, and I believe that is a problem too.
Well, I mean, because in reality, though, that's like the ultimate desire. The ultimate promise is I have access to all the information and data that I need to be able to simulate weather and all that great stuff. I think it's up to industry to keep on advancing that aspect. But, we've said it a bunch of times. There was 255 different definitions of a digital twin done by the DoD, and so and weather simulation's one of them, right?
Right.
I think you got to come from both sides. Like, of course, a customer is going to want everything simulated whenever you talk about a digital twin. So maybe better specification and trying to pull away the word digital twin from all scenarios and specify what you're talking about.
That's a great point. And that's really where we've leaned in at Verum, is saying, okay, we're not even going to talk about our products as digital twin. It's VisOps, so visual operations platform. So just acting as a primary consumption layer, understanding that at this stage in the game, most organizations out there have 250 classifications of digital twin. They have data ops products enabled. They have visual data products. So how do we pull all that together and really unleash it? It's a good point, though, because you have to define what you're trying to accomplish, to Logan's point, too.
That kind of segues into the next question here. How do we focus on the outcomes and not the shiny objects?
Mm-hmm.
Simple answer is focus on the outcomes.
Well, define the outcomes first so you know what you're focusing on, right?
Yeah, like what space are you trying to tackle? Like for us, we're heavily focused on ops and maintenance and how to make those things more efficient for the bottom line, right? And a lot of trial and error to figure out what those right use cases were. But now we've gotten to a point where we figured that out, whether it's turnaround efficiency through planning or execution, or it's giving all of my my operators access to the right data. That's been the biggest win, is focus, not go across every particular use case that's out there, not do weather simulation to start.
I think keeping the focus on outcomes is not only relevant to digital twins, but throughout our industry. I mean, especially working in the VDC space, we have access to all these great, shiny new tools, all this equipment, but are you analyzing the ROI you're actually going to get on a project, or are you doing something just because it's new, because there's hype surrounding it? So really focusing on what is the use case, like what is actionable data, and working backwards from there, rather than trying to enforce a workflow that you don't have a clear definition of exactly what's needed at the end of that.
And that drills into the people process, right? We're building something that, maybe we're detached from the people process on the ground. So are we building an outcome that we can change that process to a digital process? Is that realistic, our expectation that's going to actually happen? And are we building a function truly for the right person? Are we building it because we want it and it's there? So really tuning into the individual in the workforce that's going to need to change the way they work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And is that realistic? Does it add complexity, or is it simplifying their life? Are they bought in? Is it going to happen? If we build it, it's worth nothing if it's not used, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's like you're hitting on communication, right? And I think part of communication is actually being open and honest about from owners, from the people that are taking the digital twins or having the digital twins built, communicating what phase are you in. Am I in trying to get buy-in from the company, and I might want to show some flashy things to be able to get to there, but I know what my core is? Or am I in scale and I don't want to hear anything about innovative ideas that are out there? I want to go to every asset across the globe. And maybe just being more clear and open and honest to suppliers is a big thing.
And I don't think you have to solve every problem on the first go. You can solve one small problem and have a massive impact. And I think that's really important, not to overcomplicate as you start. It's like, what is the one small problem that we can make the largest impact today? Implement, see it working, coach on it. That's that whole change management, right?
I could not agree with that statement more. And that's, I think, the most critical way to approach deployment and building out your digital ecosystem. So it's a top-down and bottom-up approach. So you have to make sure that whatever objectives you're helping the client or the owner solve is meeting one of their typical 3 big bullseyes, which is, efficiencies, productivity, and cost reduction. But the problem that you're solving has to come from the site level. And so what are users, what inefficiency gaps are there, and efficiency killers are we seeing, and how do we solve it in a way that's going to drive the users into the platform to want to add it into their workflow? Because if they're not going to be adopting it, then it's a non-starter.
Yeah,
I think with the if they're not adopting, it's a non-starter. If you build it, they will come.
not always.
Right. I don't think that really applies with digital twins. I think we kind of have to take a different approach there. Right. Like what are those problems that we're solving? If we're starting with that one thing, and again, how are we kind of reverse engineering that and setting up for success to solve that problem, rather than just we're building this and they'll use it.
Yeah.
But that sometimes is the disconnection between upper management making that decision and the user.
Absolutely.
And that is the gap that we need to kind of tackle, I guess.
And there's fear and there's concern.
Oh, sure.
There's anxiety around, can I use these digital tools? And I've been doing it a certain way. So that whole coaching, mentoring, find your evangelists and and getting buy-in. You don't need 100% buy-in. You need, enough to move the needle, right?
But is there also a fear of being left out and not keeping up if you don't have a digital twin, right? It's like, oh, well, we need this because everybody else is doing it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that gets a lot of people in trouble because, like we just said, it's like it's been said before about tools and toys and trying to define what those are and what we actually need. But I think a lot of it is fear for they're going to get left behind.
Yeah. And there's different fears at different levels. Like at a leadership level, that's a real fear, right? And I like your point about tools and toys, right? Is it a toy or is it a tool?
Yeah. So I want to take the other side of the coin here for just a second. So I agree. I work in the AEC space, engineering firm, and so I 100% with what you guys are taking. But let's explore the other side for a second. So shiny new toys are really cool, right? Like drones were a toy before they became an industry tool. The way that we're using it now. So same thing with VR and XR, right? Like that stuff started in like amusement park rides and things like, so there, I feel like there is some value there though in shiny new toys. And, does it return all the time? Probably not. I think we'll probably discuss some of that later. A lot of that fails, but it does drag the rest of us forward in industry, I think.
I think a good lens on that is the excitement to adopt and to transform.
Yeah.
And it may not initially get the ROI, but the idea is there's a long game here, right? And bringing those technologies in-house in the long game seek to make some transformational change.
Yeah. The balance, I like that a lot. The balance is that the person or the group inside of that corporation better have the long play in their mind. But absolutely, what did we do? We showed shiny toys. And what did it do? It got investment.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
It inspired somebody.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they say innovation is bred from necessity. So things are only a shiny toy or a tool
If there's something needed.
until the ROI is
Yeah.
That's cyclical thing, but it's a good point.
I like how you flipped that around. That was good. Good. Okay, well let's look about kind of talking about value on that point and making it stick. So first question is, can you share a use case where the digital twin clearly paid off, whether in cost savings, risk reduction, downtime, safety, efficiencies? Let's talk about a real world example, and can you quantify what that meant for your organization?
Yeah.
Right.
So good.
Please
Go ahead.
So for us, so we had we're working on a project with National Park Service in the Grand Canyon National Park. It's a the Trans Canyon Waterline project. It's a waterline that feeds from the North Rim to the South Rim and some infrastructure in the Inner Canyon. And it's Grand Canyon's a tough environment, right, to build in. And so we took the approach of trying to for the proposed route and sort of the surrounding area, could we build that out in sort of a digital twin framework? And so that's the approach that we did. What it did for us, a couple of things. So like in bid documents and things that contractors are looking at, it allowed us to bring the site to more people instead of more people to the site, so that flying people into the canyon used up a lot of national park resources, helicopters and things that could have been fighting fires and other things that were going on when we were there. That was a big deal. But I think the real payoff for us as an engineering company was the ability to iterate design without sending more people out to survey again and again and again and again. So they could simulate and iterate the design ad nauseum, and really come up with the best, most constructible, most efficient route.
So reduction of costs on the back and forth to site, reduction of schedule because you could got digital information, and better quality outcomes from the iterative design, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
I have one. We're working with Miami Airport on a $160 million parking garage.
Yep.
That we started from the get-go, forcing the contractor to use a digital twin. So this is the first project in Miami history that is going to be done within budget. They're not going to be using the 10% contingency, and it's going to open 4 weeks ahead of schedule. So we compare that parking garage with the one that is right next door. And just by opening 4 weeks, they're going to have $3.2 million in revenue that they were not expecting. Yeah. So what we ended up doing with the airport was, rather than doing a return of investment, we did a cost-saving analysis. And on top of that $3.2 million, we throw all our findings about clashes and constructability and so on. So the number ended up being like $5 million.
That's a real number. That's
a real number. Right. Yeah. So now
revenue in your pocket, because that's the best type, right?
So now they're actually starting a new project that is the extension of the South Terminal, Concourse K. It's going to be about $900 million project. So now we started to extrapolate, look what we accomplished on this $160 million towards the $900 million. So numbers are way much more significant, as you can imagine. So that was, I believe, a successful.
And that's probably helping future projects.
That is one, and we're using that model to get the people from operation and maintenance and say, do you want to walk through the model and see where are the mechanical, the electrical equipment before even the project starts? So we're trying to tackle this from not only the design and construction aspect, but now we're going to be using this in operation and maintenance, like for the next few years.
How about you, Logan?
I think sometimes it's hard to quantify. So when we think about it from the GC side, it's how many emissions, errors, rework did we negate by either scanning or creating a digital twin, and how do you put a dollar value to that? So we can analyze, I don't know, if we had to core drill a sleeve, how much that might cost, multiply it by the amount of sleeves in a deck that we avoided moving because we were QCing it through the use of our digital twin process. But I think sometimes it's hard to like put an absolute dollar value on it because you are preventing so many problems from occurring. So I guess in hindsight, you can like measure the cost of when problems occur, you know, how much that impacts schedule, impacts budget. But
I still think it's a really important thing though. So you are forecasting the value of what you're doing digitally and you're looking backwards on how you did it before. And I think that's very valid, especially if you work with someone in the finance department that can truly look at their books and they can see the cost overruns and how doing business over the last project or handful of projects or period of time, that becomes quantifiable. We did that at DFW, and we actually had the finance people justify their numbers conservatively and them talk about it, and that became the truth and gospel. So I think don't ignore how significant that is, right? It's still significant.
Yeah, I think it's obviously a challenge for everybody as we're trying to quantify the use cases, and it's hard to drill down to really where the value is coming from. One of our major clients is leveraging the platform or digital twin just for logistics planning and 40 planning for turnarounds. So they have, 300 or 400 turnarounds a year, major turnarounds greater than 200 million. And the way that they were planning or doing their logistics planning prior to having digital tools was literally using a plot plan and a tack and trying to figure out where all their cranes were going, manually writing what's the boom radii, and then trying to scope out where the work was going to be occurring. Super risky, not just on a cost and schedule factors, but when you're thinking about, SIMOPS and hot work and making sure that you're not putting people in areas of risk. So by attaching your schedule and putting your cranes digitally in that environment, just using laser scans, we can assign, $1 per hour value to each maintenance planner, scheduler, people who are in the field doing work, and they're saving, millions of dollars every quarter just from that, and quantifying it using like $350 per hour as an example for a maintenance planner or schedule.
That's a slippery slope. You got to be really careful on who you're justifying that savings to, because if it's a maintenance team and they're reducing hours, they won't like that so much. So, right? Yeah. So I found that you had different conversations at different levels to measure success, right? But it's a good point, and I think we can't be shy to forecast and base it on some historical numbers.
Headcount move is a hard thing for sure.
Yeah.
Anything else on this one?
One more.
I just digital design, digital delivery, digital collaboration, digital twin. And, we've all seen the values, successes, and speed and lower contingency out of what we've been doing with digital asset lifecycle and digital delivery for many, many, many years. And when do we turn the switch and then turn that into a digital twin? And I've heard, I hear a lot about these successes, but is it a digital twin? Or is it just digital delivery and digital coordination?
Yeah.
Or does it matter?
It doesn't matter.
It's always a business problem, what
It
we're
doesn't
doing,
matter.
right?
Sometimes obscurity of the name is also clarity for certain levels of management too, right? Like if you can attach to the digital twin term,
There's budgets for digital twins.
yeah, exactly, right.
But you're right. You're right about that. Is that just a digital deliverable, or is a digital twin? So the case that I shared with you a few minutes ago about the parking garage, we actually identify each asset that the operation and maintenance people are going to use in O&M. We actually define a unique asset identifier, and we are linking all the documents with that unique asset so it can be connected to sensors from the equipment. So to your point,
Yeah.
how far do you want to take it? What is a digital twin? There's different digital twins, but I mean, I believe the one that we should be concerned about is the one that you can use for the next 30 or 50 years. That is really a digital twin. If not, it's just a digital deliverable.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Like, I guess I'll give an example of ours for sure. We've got a lot of value cases that are true paid off value. One that we've kind of gone public on is around turnaround execution time. So, compressor fan flange replacement. We were able to digitize that all above site and before going out to the field, so we had no field fit up. And in certain parts of that execution time, save 75% of the execution time. So that's dollars, right? The hard thing of shifting headcount back and forth is if I'm not removing it, I'm shifting it, and shifting it doesn't help a ton. But if I'm bringing a unit back up online within, 75% faster, then
You can catch
it's a
up.
productivity conversation.
Yeah.
Then it's less on a cost savings. People are still there, still salaried employees.
Yeah.
They're still working. They're doing something different.
exactly.
But it's a productivity
It's productivity.
time as opposed to an actual hard cost time.
Yeah, and people love hard, right? A lot more than nice productivity side. I do want to hit that part that you were talking about around the digital twin, big term. It's great. It's a great selling point. But the core to almost all of this work is master asset registry.
Yeah.
And having one unique identifier for asset information. And that's not a digital twin. That's data management and trying to do data management right. People step over that all the time. I'll be honest. We have at certain points in times, and what we finally realized was there's no way you're going to scale across every asset across the globe if I don't have a singular asset registry that's not convoluted, not some things filled out in SAP or whatever the particular tool is of your choice at ERP, but truly governed equipment data.
And I think that any one of these success stories, as long as they're approached with the mindset of maintenance philosophy, traditional RAM or RMA, however it's reliability, maintainability, accessibility. If you approach those digital delivery projects with that philosophy, then it's easy to go into the long term, the long game.
Yeah, and I think you hit on the nail there. Is dissecting the work management process. What's the human process that is necessary to do the job effectively, to high quality, safely, without risk, and to complete it so it doesn't become a problem in the future. But it's a human process that we're digitizing, and there are places where digital information becomes valuable, and there's also when it's not valuable. So it's understanding that and making sure we match those expectations, right? Right. We kind of covered the second question, so the flow's going well here. The question was about measuring digital twin success, and other than that, we built one. So I think we kind of covered that, and I think we go to the next question here. But great conversation. Do digital twins actually work for making work easier for people, or do they risk adding more complexity? And I think this is one we really probably everyone's smirking here. So love to dive into this one.
Yeah, I'd say both for us so far. Obviously, like for scenarios like I was mentioning before, created efficiencies. But you can sometimes get into the shiny tool part where you might add complexity through user interfaces that are more complex for a user versus, hey, I'm used to a notebook in my hand, and now you gave me this thing that looks like an engineering tool.
Yeah.
I don't know how to operate it, and I think that's kind of an unsung hero part of digital twin success, digital access to visual and spatial and all of the engineering data is the Achilles heel is how people actually access it, the visuals of how they actually access it.
Yeah,
And a lot of tools in the past, a lot of tools even now are very much engineering focused mindset tools versus super simple. Pick it up. Your grandma can pick it up and work it.
Yeah, ease of use is really important. Right information to the right person, right time is really important.
And I believe what you just mentioned is key because the people in the field from operation and maintenance, they're used to pencil and piece of paper. And now you're providing a model and they're like, now what?
They're in 90 decibel environments, 110 degree heat, gloves on that sometimes they have capacitive touch. Like it is... I would call it a nightmare for those folks out in the field. And as soon as you add something that has more than 3 buttons on it,
they freak out.
Goodbye.
Yeah. Some of the first trainings that we were doing, we were training too much about the interface, too much about the functionality of all the data lives. And it's like, well, what do you actually need? It might only be 2 or 3 things to start.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, my life is better now because I can do these 2 things.
And you build on top of
that. Yeah. Sorry, you were going to say something, Logan?
I think it's also about having your audience in mind, right? Like if I go to one of my superintendents on the job site and I give them the entire BIM model and ask them to open it in Revit, I'm going to get nowhere with that. Yeah. If I give them even something as simple as like Navisworks Freedom or like the Procore BIM viewer and I strip everything down and I just set up views to exactly the area they're working in that they need to see and they can toggle like one thing on and off. Yeah. That is going to have much better reception than an overload of information for someone, to your point, who's in the field in 110 degree weather with gloves on. Like I think we're going to have less success with adoption and implementation of digital twins if we provide too much information to the audience that is really like in the field doing the work who is not used to using this technology. So thinking about how we provide that information gradually so we're not overloading people.
It's like the persona driven output or visualization, right? And I think this is such a huge opportunity for everyone in the industry to collaborate because, you know, the interface that I get that for a maintenance tech versus the interface that I would get for the operator versus the interface that I would give to our engineer that's doing work are 3 completely different interfaces and maybe completely different tools. And right now, like where we struggle is that's having them be 3 different tools causes an interoperability issue. How do I sync the data across all of them? So that's been like a huge focus for us is how do you actually work on open standards and make sure that we can get data back and forth. But it's still a problem. It's still absolutely one.
And getting to like that end goal of a consumer-based experience, it's something that we're working for. And we would love to get to that point where you mentioned user-based or role-based suggestions. Like if you think about logging into Netflix or Instagram and it just shows you the recommendations based on what you typically access. And then that if we can get the digital experience to that level of consumption, it'd be pretty special. So I think like industry's really leaning in to try to get there with things like open process and open architecture and all of that and honing in on what the users need. You made a good point though, Logan, about that too. Yeah.
And identifying the right people when you start deploying these technologies, especially in the field, it's key because you mentioned overwhelm them with a big model. They're not going to use it, but the key people that you need to identify it and build on top of that. And then I mean, I believe that is important too.
And that's going to flow into our next question. So we know that most change initiatives fail. The big engineering or the big consulting firms say 70% failure is kind of where the norm is. So what does it take to culturally and organizationally make sure that your digital twin is going to be successful?
I'd say part of it would definitely be explaining the vision and getting buy-in, making sure people understand what you're working towards.
Yeah.
So for instance, with our trades, if we are trying to deliver a digital twin, whatever we decide that end goal and end definition is, we're not going to have much success unless we have our trades bought in. So unless we have the BIM manpower allocated with all of our trades, if we need to have families in Revit set up a certain way, we need to have certain parameters defined. They need to understand what the end goal is and how their work plays into that, rather than just, we need you to do this thing because we want to do something new and cool.
Yeah.
Really making sure that everyone, all stakeholders involved in the process understand the value that you're going to get from it.
Right.
Yeah, I'd say build a vision that withstands an initiative failure. Like you're going to have multiple of them. And that, that vision's not just, a mindset, but that vision's also permeating, passion across different organizations and groups, and find those people to be able to pull together. Because we failed. You're going to fail. 100%.
Yeah, definitely.
It's going to happen. If you don't have a way to be able to bounce back up to where your vision was, then you're gone.
I think it's so important. This is not a project.
No.
It's a program. It's a way of changing transformally how we're going to do business. And if that comes from the high level, it's not negotiable. Like, we're doing it. We're going to have our failures as we go, but the clear communication and the alignment and having the right resources and the right people, all those things are critical, right?
Yeah.
How about you, gentlemen?
Yeah, I think it is a mode of understanding, and so sort of switching into that mindset is helpful. I think for us, though, one of the ways to cut through that is to not aim for the pie in the sky. Aim at first for some quick wins, and that gets the ball rolling downhill, right?
Yeah.
Do you have to remain optimistic?
Yes.
I got this morning thinking about this as a pessimist. And I had a couple conversations this morning that reminded me that every initiative has failures, and I think it's a common thread when it comes to digital twins. But remaining optimistic, and a lot of it has to do with endurance, rate of attrition, and
Yes.
can you keep the dream going long enough to see it through? It's a hard one to carry.
Yeah, I can definitely resonate that on our fourth year of this roadmap that we're on. And it's a roller coaster, right? You have your highs and lows, but you need those people to stay focused on where you're going and being positive, or you can get distracted, right?
People don't talk about the lows enough, to be honest. 70%'s a big number, though. Like, I'm looking at that, I'm like, if we failed 70%, we're probably done.
Yeah.
But I mean, like the failure part of it, if we don't talk about it to be able to share, then probably as an industry, we're not going to be able to learn together.
Yeah.
First 2 years of us was trial by error.
You got to identify the wins, even the small ones, right? Because people above are not understanding some of those benefits. So I love the note taker, and I can go to my notes after me and extract what were the wins, what were the positives, collecting those becomes user stories that you percolate up. And the more you can confidently deliver the small successes of wins across the organization, the more support say, no, this is working, this is good, and having that momentum, right?
Yeah, we've seen obviously clients who have tried to launch digital programs with us, and I think the biggest reason for some of those not getting off the ground was taking too much on at one time and saying, we're going to get all of this done in quarter.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of learnings for us during that as well, and really leaning into modules and progressive implementation and guiding our clients through the journey, rather than saying, yeah, okay, for sure, you want to have 6 API integrations and roll this out to 5 sites, but you don't even have any scans done yet. But yeah, no problem. It's really about, starting small, quick wins, low hanging fruit, and then progressive value and adoption is how you're going to win long term. So, to your point, Kyle, like talking about the lows, we do it a lot because we have to learn from that to make sure that we can, advocate for our clients in the process as well. So
Example might
had a lot of them. Yeah.
Okay, let's shift here to scaling and the future. So looking at governance, data quality, and handling at certain checkpoints, how do we go past the checkpoint and become operational with that governance and change? You mentioned the asset registry being a big part of that, right? But the continuous handover, how do we deal with that long term?
So there's an entire team dedicated to the asset registry and managing the governance of that. And I looked at it and like scoffed for like the longest time of like, why do you have such a big team? And you're like, feels like you're moving like a millimeter every year. But it was because the change of business process. If I don't go back and so say P&IDs, if I don't go back and update that digitally versus redlining it and then it gets thrown in a drawer and then I've got to go scan that stuff, OCR it again, and then bring it back into a tool. If I don't have that workflow changed across every asset, then you're kind of hosed. For the visual and spatial side, for where we're heavily focused on, this is a fun story. I mean, you mentioned it earlier about having the right cats and specs for our heavy industry. That's management of change is a beast for us right now. I'd say we've got some thoughts and ways to solve it. We're doing it across a couple of assets, but I think this is an area that's like ripe for disruption. We've come out and said reality first, trying to drive that as much as possible because it lowers the total cost of ownership. On the flip side of that, for us, it's also harder to maintain change over time too. Change that gives you a singular visual front end versus multiple different ones. Or a bunch
and how do you prioritize that too, right? Because it's a monstrous effort, especially all the legacy data.
Yeah.
So how do you focus in on the right critical things that are going to be meaningful, impact, and drive our ROI? We'd love to say that everything will be perfect all the time. That's a bit elusive, right?
Yeah. Right now, it's at least, if I'm looking at the screen, I know that it's out of date or I have a change request that's going in to go update it and scan it and then bring it back in. Whether that's a model back in or a scan or whatever it is. The knowledge of that's the main thing that we're trying to focus on for the end user, where they might not have had that in the past with a big model.
Yeah, but to keep it up to date, which is your point, it's going to be, I mean, the value is if the information is up to date.
Yeah.
And organizations need to understand that requires budget, money, time, people.
Yeah.
Which is a challenge.
Yeah.
I guess you get this new building, digital twin with assets connected and everything else. But the problem is to keep it up to date so people can consume that data. That is the part that is something that requires money. So
yeah, that's the healthy tension forever. Is like everything requires money and it requires more money, and then
and then more money.
Management is like, no, it doesn't require that much money. Meet somewhere in the middle.
I think it goes back to maintenance philosophy. Every year it has to be budgeted for. It has to be consistent capture, consistent standards, SOPs, data as a service internally to the organization. It has to be maintained, and they don't budget that far ahead for digital twins, and they think they think the lights are just going to stay on, and they're not. How do you take care of a chiller? What is its life cycle, or a cracker, whatever it may be in a heavy industrial facility? The same philosophy has to be applied to digital twins as critical infrastructure. It is critical infrastructure, and it will fall apart, and it will break, and it will start leaking, and now we're covered in toxic digital soup, and it's got to be maintained.
We don't say those words.
Well, and who's responsible for change? Everyone is responsible. When the culture gets to the point where the digital tools and they're bought into and they're actually something that the field teams know they can trust, if they report change, if they communicate change, then you have the community that you work with involved with that change management. If it's a single person, I remember speaking at the AES conference, a woman that had brought on to Cargill, and she's really struggling because, she's really trying to drive everything on her own, and it's just absolutely impossible. It has to be everyone bought in with that shared vision and that clear communication that they are bought into, yes, I want the change and I'm going to give you the feedback of what needs to be done too, right? All right. Good discussion. Okay. Next question. Should we view a digital twin as a standalone product or a part of a larger ecosystem for decision making? I think it's going to be a pretty easy question, but we talk a little bit about it. But feel free.
I think that's our whole story. Our whole story is it is an ecosystem. It's not a product. I can't go buy it. You're not going to buy a digital twin. Period. That's probably the summary.
To an extent. I mean, we're talking about budget and allocating budget.
You're not going to buy a singular tool to deliver a digital twin. It is a culmination of a bunch of different data sources and information and access to that. And you've got different parts of the organizations that are going to be involved in that. And if they aren't, then it's probably actually not a scalable system. I'd say like data management as a whole for creating the asset registry versus managing visual assets. If we took that on in the same organization, we would drown and fall apart for sure.
And you haven't even added the OT layer.
We're not. I mean, I'm in the hot topic conversation of the OT layer.
I love
now.
poking you on that.
Yeah. And that's an entirely different organization.
Yeah.
Right. And it should be, because again, process simulation stands on its own. Right. It stands on its own. How you access that in a visual environment stands on its own.
And it may not need to be connected.
Yeah.
Right? It has to have an inherent value.
Yeah.
Some benefits, some outcome.
We know the fuzzy value. We've kept on saying the incline to investment is higher, and the ROI is a little bit sloped down versus asset management in a visual way. Input is like not that much. Output's high.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to just add on to that quickly. So I know I started out this conversation too, also saying that digital twin is, made up of different components and complexities, but it really does, at the end of the day, depend on what your definition of a digital twin or visual experience is, because it can just start with visual data, and that could be, reality scans, geospatial data, engineering data, and having that in one environment. So I don't want people in the audience who maybe haven't started, deployment or looking at that to get overwhelmed and say, oh God, I need to create all these different data layers and engineering products and all of this, and make sure those are good before we start, because you can just start with visualization. I would say just make sure that whatever tools you're using are at the end of the day interoperable. So whatever data you have, you can separate it from that software and plug it in and then grow over time. But yeah, I definitely agree that it is an ecosystem.
Between y'all's two things, you brought a thing that I wanted to bring back up, that you can't buy a digital twin, but you are going to buy a number of tools and products to be able to get there. So if a company like ours were to build a digital twin, we've done it. It's not a good idea. I can tell you that. So definitely the aspect of you're going to buy things.
It's important because, I do see a lot of this, open architecture is great. And there are certain things that an owner can do to manage and own their data. But are you a software company?
Yeah, no.
Are you in the business of building software and evolving software? So there's a fine line where you want to start and stop with your journey.
A lot of those things come back to data movability and like data principles. That's where like the companies move for us as a focus. It's not so much, am I going to build a digital twin? Am I going to build an XR experience? I'm going to build whatever it is, but I am for sure going to make sure that I can move data between those particular tools.
Yeah.
And that's the part that you can't buy.
Yeah. One thing that we're noticing is just the embedded apps in software vendors' platforms function quite well. And just because you can do it in an enterprise app doesn't mean you should force the organization to do that. We're noticing that with like Copilot and language learning apps in particular.
Tell our management that.
It's like, should I use the same one for Workday that I use in my twin? And it's, I think that's a really important consideration to, know when it's just good to go with what you got in your system.
Yeah.
Okay. Next question here. Where are we on? Number 4. Are digital twins truly helping organizations to transform how they work, or are they just another incremental change? And I think change is changing behavior. Transformation is completely different in terms of the cultural change, the adaptation, that just the element of transformation. What does that look like to you guys?
I think on our end during the build process, it is a huge tool for transformation. We're building smarter, we're building more efficiently, we're cutting costs, we're cutting schedule. And if we think about digital twins in the purest form of just a physical or a digital representation of physical space and using that as a decision-making tool as we build, I mean, that's huge. It's more than just hype. It really is helping us change the way we build. And we're seeing this implemented across more and more projects where we'll scan a space, we'll get accurate as built. We can give them to all the stakeholders, our design partners. We can, from the beginning, be working from a single source of truth of what is actually there rather than making assumptions and taking guesses. So I would say that is really transforming, at least on the construction side.
Right. And I will touch to your point on what you just mentioned a few minutes ago. There are different digital twins depending who you talk to. There's a digital twin for design, and that is okay. There's a digital twin for construction, which is okay as well. So I believe the misconception of there's only one digital twin that will serve everybody, that is a problem. So if you're a design firm and your digital twin is a design model for design, that's fine. I mean, so...
Yeah, that's a good point. I absolutely unequivocally believe that digital tools, digital twins are transforming the way that we work and the way that we operate and the way that we process and consume complex data. I think that it is, one of the most pivotal transformations in industry since, I don't know, who knows how long, but the way that people and organizations are investing and leaning in and the innovations and the platforms that are coming together, the way people are leaning into that, I think that's really telling to say this is actually how we are going to be moving forward, how we're going to operate, how we're going to live, how we're going to process and consume data. So it is really exciting. And I think, yeah, of course, we're, debugging some of the hype around that. But at the end of the day, I agree. It's absolutely transforming the way that we work.
Yeah. For us, it has transformed business work processes, and we're changing more of them. So you'd say if it wasn't successful, then we'd probably stop transforming more processes, but that we're still continuing to do that for sure.
Yeah, I think it's transforming work because it's transforming the way that we understand the world and the way that we interact with the built and natural world. And so, it's an abstraction, right? So, humans came up with a great idea that an idea itself is an abstraction, right? And we can kill the idea instead of killing ourselves. Same thing here. Like we can build a digital model or a digital twin, and we can do all kinds of things to it and kill it in digital's face instead of killing ourselves. And so,
I like that.
We're that's it. It's very much in line with the sort of learning and creative process that we've been living in the human experience for a long time.
It's to the point where your team goes digital first for digital tools rather than going to the field. I think that's when you start to see that transformation happen. Is that you have the data. It's like, well, I'm not going to get my boots on and walk out there first.
Yeah.
I'm going to my digital tools first. That's when we really become transformational, right? Yeah. Is to inherently, by habit, go to those tools first.
Yeah. When we have like a VDC person in the trailer and our superintendents come to us rather than going out in the field with the tape measure, like that is just the best metric of success. It's such a great feeling.
Yeah. It seems like a small thing though, right? Like, but
those little wins.
It's huge.
Right. That's, innovation is actually happening. Yeah. We're moving forward.
Well, how could you measure that? How many times that would happen in a day, a week, a year with how many people? That is transformative.
Yeah.
That is transformation.
I think the digital twin is creating a destination for other products, and the service providers, they're now forced to extend the value of their product. Yeah. Right. So a reality capture company, a service provider, they now know that the destination is the digital twin, and that forces them to standardize and look ahead because this data it's not a one and done milestone, this milestone of the project or record, right? This is going to live on beyond you, beyond your company, maybe. And now it's forcing, hopefully, companies like Autodesk and scanning service providers and surveyors to think to the digital twin when they start creating their standards and specifications and catalogs and, planning for the future. I think is improving all of us, because we have a destination, the digital twin.
Agreed. So we're at 9:21. I think we have 9 minutes, but if someone's starting at 10, I don't want to cut into the next speaker's time.
It might be me.
Yeah.
We do have a number of questions up here. We can maybe pull one or so. Let me just take the first one here. So what software interface tool have you been using and that you found success with adoption, ease of use, and input of data? It seems like this is the crux of digital twin success. What software tools? I mean, there's a lot out there, right? We all use different tools for different purposes. I mean, Viram, you're obviously on the stage because people are using you, but
Yeah.
I think that's an individual journey. And with the amount of tools that are out there, it's pretty amazing out there, but it's defining what your needs are, your functional capabilities, and just seeing if those are going to match. But user ease of use is really critical.
Yeah. I'd say that I like how you kind of skirted around it in a good way. It's like, there are tons of good platforms out there. We've seen a lot of success through Viram, but we've also seen a lot of success through other platforms as well.
Yeah, and I don't think that to your point, there's not just space at the table for one solution. Like there's different use cases or value driving different visual products. And like we as vendors or SaaS platforms need to come together and work together to drive value forward and not just be, monolithic in our thinking that we need to service everybody. It's a
I kind of have been thinking it like this, like, for us, what is our responsibility? Our responsibility is to make sure we're tackling the right use case that provides the right amount of benefit, and then building the right data structures. And then where industry comes in is there are solutions to meet those use cases, and then you also need to meet these industry standards. And like that should probably be the mecca that we live in for a while.
I think you have a toolkit to start with, and just ripping tools out and putting new tools in is not always the best approach. So looking at, an Esri ArcGIS, installation that's quite pervasive for an organization. How do you level up with that tool to use it to help work digitally? So there's different ways to look at your tool set and improve them. And then there's tools you got to say, this is not going to work long term. We're going to need to solve that with some other tool or some other process, right? Okay. So we end on that note. Appreciate everyone's time.
Yeah, no, thank you.
That was a good conversation.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.